Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission. Today is Monday, January 27th. It's approximately 10 a.m. We're here today concerning dockets number 2026, 236E, and 237E. This case was opened on January 13th, and continued today due to inclement weather. First, a roll call of commissioners. All commissioners are present in the hearing room and ready to proceed. I would ask Ms. Wessinger Hill to again review the purpose of this hearing for those who are joining us and may not have been involved earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all those present virtually and also in the hearing room. As the chairman mentioned, this is a proceeding and continuation of a hearing that began on January 13th in dockets number 2024-286E and 2024-287E. These dockets were combined for hearing purposes only, and they concern the applications filed on October 18th, 2024 by Central Electric Cooperative Incorporated and docket number 2024-286E and by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC in docket number 2024-287E. Central Electric Power Cooperative seeks from the Commission permission and a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of two double circuit 230 kV lines with the Allison Creek Industrial Park in York County and associated facilities. Duke Energy Carolinas seeks from the Commission a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the modification of Newport B&W 230 kV line and the construction and operation of Hands Mill 230 kV switching station and associated facilities to feed new lines owned by Central Electric Power Cooperative Incorporated for customer of York Electric Cooperative, Inc. and the associated facilities. These applications are filed in accordance with the requirements of the South Carolina Utility Facilities Siting and Environmental Protection Act found in Chapter 33 of Title 58 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. As the chairman mentioned, this hearing was scheduled and noticed by the clerk and published on the Commission's site as well as in other avenues. Mr. Chairman and other members of the Commission, this docket is in order.
Thank you so much. Would the parties now introduce themselves, starting on your side, Ms. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, members of the Commission. My name is Katie Brown. I'm in-house counsel for Duke Energy Carolinas. Here with me this morning is my co-counsel, Lyle Trawick. He's with the law firm of Robinson Gray. We appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, Commissioners, good morning. Court Walsh from the Robinson Gray Law Firm. I'm here representing my client, Central Electric Power Cooperative. Because I'm not sure if the commissioners want to have opening remarks, I will just take a moment, if I can, to identify some folks who are here. Obviously, Chris Ware will be one of our witnesses.
Certainly, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Chris Ware is a VP from Central Electric. He is going to be here as a witness. In addition to Mr. Ware, also from York Electric Cooperative, Mr. Craig Spencer, the President and CEO, is here, as well as Mark Howey, who's the VP of Community Development for York Electric. They're here because ultimately, and you'll hear more about this during the hearing today, they are the ultimate service provider for the customer that is at issue for much of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. Donna Rainey on behalf of ORS, and with me today is Claire Benj and Stig Rasmussen.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. Is there anything we need to discuss before we start? All right. As far as the witnesses, and whatever order that they're going to be handled, it's kind of listed on my sheet as witnesses for both of you. Who will be handling the witnesses to start with?
You'll be starting, right, with the central witnesses?
Yeah, I think we technically may have filed just before Duke, so I think Central would go first. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've lined up the members of the proposed panel in the order in which they will go.
Okay. All right. Well, then, Mr. Walsh, bring them up.
All right, thank you.
And Chair Powers, if it suits the commission, we'd like to go ahead and bring up the Duke witnesses because we plan to follow directly after their presentation.
That's fine and dandy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, Chair Powers and the commissioners, I'd like to call and have Mr. Chris Ware and also Mr. Nathan Bass come up and take their spots at the witness table.
And Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, members of the commission, on behalf of Duke Energy Carolinas, Mr. Bass is also testifying as our witness. I would also call up Mr. Matthew Knudsen and Mr. Matt Koenig.
I'm going to swear you in, starting with Mr. Ware. If you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir. Mr. Bass, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Knudsen, if you'll raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Koenig, do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's Monday.
I tell you. We're all lucky just to be here, really, Chair Powers. Mr. Ware, would you state your full name for the record, please?
My name is William Christopher Ware. I go by Chris.
And Mr. Ware, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Central Electric Power Cooperative, Inc. I'm its Vice President of Engineering and Engineering Services.
And in that role, can you describe your responsibilities at Central?
My responsibilities are for transmission design, construction, as well as right-of-way acquisition and procurement.
Do you have any licenses or certifications?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer here in the state of South Carolina.
Mr. Ware, in this proceeding, did you cause to be prepared or prepare approximately 7 pages of direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
And those were pre-filed with the commission, right?
Yes.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to make to your pre-filed direct testimony this time?
No, I do not.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. Ware's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, also noting that it's subject to, in part, confidentiality under Order 2024-779 that was issued by the Commission on December 5th, 2024.
All right. The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Ware will be entered into record as if given orally from the stand. The confidential portions of that testimony shall remain confidential as long as legally necessary.
Thank you. Quickly, Mr. Ware, did you review the application that Central filed in this docket?
Yes, I did.
And you're aware that there is a collective Exhibit A that contains 3 agreements. Those are an agreement for large power electric service, an amendment to that, as well as a Phase 2 large power electric service agreement, correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with those documents?
Yes, I am.
Chair Powers, I would ask that what was previously marked as Collective Exhibit A as a part of Central's application be admitted into the record as the first exhibit for this hearing.
Thank you. The pre-filed exhibit identified by Mr. Ware and marked if identification be placed in the record as exhibit number 1.
And I also would like to note, Chair Powers, that that too is also subject to a separate confidentiality order in part.
The confidential version of the exhibit shall remain confidential as long as legally necessary.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. Ware, have you prepared a summary of your testimony in this matter?
Yes, I have.
Would you please provide that summary and read that to the members of the commission, please?
Sure. Mr. Chairman and the commission, the purpose of my testimony is to support Central's application for a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity to construct two 230 kV lines to connect the Hands Mill switching station to be built by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC with a substation to be built and owned by QTS Data Centers, an industrial customer of Central member York Electric Cooperative, Inc., for the operation of a data center in York County, South Carolina. The two 230 kV lines will be located within the Allison Creek Industrial Park in York County. QTS and New Horizon Electric Cooperative will provide and clear new right-of-way to support the lines. The project does not involve any railroad or highway crossings. The Central project is a companion to the DEC project, which involves the construction of new 230 kV facilities, including folding the existing Newport black and white 230 kV line into the proposed Hands Mill 230 kV switching station. Both the DEC project and Central project are necessary to provide service to the York Electric customer. Central and Duke Energy are cooperating on the planning, permitting, and construction of their respective portions of the overall project. Site assessments for both portions of the project were conducted by the Pike Engineering firm. The need for the project is driven by the demands for service under the Phase 1 Large Power Electric Service Agreement executed on June 25th, 2023, and the Phase 2 Large Power Electric Service Agreement executed on July 12th, 2024 between York Electric and QTS. These agreements recite that QTS plans to construct a data center and require York Electric and Central to arrange for the construction of facilities necessary to serve the data center. The agreements also provide that QTS will install, own, operate, and maintain substation facilities necessary to provide service to the data center. The project will provide the connection between the new Duke Energy Hands Mill switching station and the customer's substations to be constructed on its property. QTS has agreed to pay all costs of the transmission and distribution facilities to be constructed to provide service to its data center. As a result, these costs will not be shifted to other members of York Electric or Central. This project will benefit the community as it will bring new jobs and substantial investment to York County. These investments will provide considerable local and state tax revenue as well as other positive economic benefits. The size and load factor of the data center will benefit all members of Central, including York Electric, by making significant contributions through rates to cover existing fixed costs while directly funding the project to serve the customer's load. This concludes the summary of my testimony.
Mr. Ware, thank you. Chair Powers, normally Mr. Ware would immediately be available for questions from the commission. However, I'd ask to reserve that until the remaining members of the panel have been able to testify.
That's fine.
Right,
However
thank you.
want to proceed.
Next, in support of our case, Central is calling Mr. Nathan Bass, seated to Mr. Ware's right, to testify. Mr. Bass, you're already sworn in. Could you state your full name for the record, though?
Nathan Bass.
And by whom are you employed, and what's your role there?
I'm employed by Pike Engineering, and as an update to my direct testimony where I stated my position as manager of the Facilities Planning and Siting Department, I'm now director of that same department, among others.
And how long have you been with Pike Engineering?
Slightly more than 14 years.
Okay. And what are your licenses or certifications, if any?
I'm a professional landscape architect in the state of South Carolina and North Carolina.
And how long have you had that certification?
Approximately 10 years.
Mr. Bass, did you prepare or cause to be prepared approximately 16 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
And if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
Yes, I do.
Could you please let the commission know what those are?
Yes. First, on page 6 of my direct testimony, the time frame for which Pike conducted the studies is listed as May. The work actually began in April. Second, on page 7 of my direct testimony, which was filed on November 18th, 2024, I explained that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has listed the monarch butterfly as a candidate species. On December of that same year, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service changed the classification of the monarch butterfly to proposed threatened under the Endangered Species Act. I want to make this update on the record so that the parties and the commission are aware.
Mr. Bass, thank you for the update. Chair Powers, at this time, I would ask that that Mr. Bass's pre-filed direct testimony with corrections be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Nathan Bass will be entered into the record with corrections as given by him and as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Bass, turning back to your testimony for a moment, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that are part of your pre-filed testimony?
I did.
And am I correct that that was your CV, a resume, was Exhibit 1, and also Exhibit 2 was the transmission line sighting report, and those were both filed as a part of your testimony?
That's correct.
Do you have any changes to your exhibits at this time?
I do.
And please, what are they?
First, on page 43 and Appendix B of the environmental report, which was filed as Exhibit 2 to my direct testimony. As I explained previously, the monarch butterfly has been reclassified from candidate species to proposed threatened under the Endangered Species Act. While it does not change any of my conclusions, again, I wanted to make the update on the record so that the parties and the commission are aware. Second, on page 26 of the environmental report, the time frame for which Pike conducted the studies is listed as May. As I indicated earlier, the work actually began in April. Finally, on page 42 of the environmental report, the statement below table 5.6-1 should read as follows. Total tree clearing within the proposed new right-of-way will be approximately 4.6 acres, most of which will be cleared by the property owner, QTS, prior to Central's possession of the right-of-way. This replaces the word all with most.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Chair Powers, at this time I would ask that those 2 documents, Mr. Bass's resume as well as the report that he was just referencing and correcting, be admitted as as evidence into the record in this hearing and to be numbered next in order.
The corrected pre-filed exhibits of witness Bass identified as 1 and 2 in his identification or marked for identification as 1 exhibit and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 2.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Belzer.
Mr. Chairman, I request that the counsel and the witness provide corrected pages that he has referenced and submit those through the DMS following the hearing.
Can you do that, Mr. Walsh?
We can, Chair Powers.
I'm not asking for the whole documents, just the pages that have corrections.
Yep, I understand, Commissioner Belzer. We can take care of that easily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bass, really quickly talking about your report, do you recall having a couple of graphics in your report that you had used or prepared?
Yes.
I think in front of you have a photocopy of one, but also up on the screen. Do you see that graphic?
I do.
And do you recognize that as one of the graphics that was in your report?
Yes.
And is this a true and accurate copy based on what you see here?
It is.
And Chair Powers, even though this is already a part of Exhibit 2, I request that I move that the graphic that we're now displaying be admitted into evidence as hearing Exhibit 3. Thank you. Finally, Mr. Bass, have you prepared a summary of your testimony in this matter?
I have.
And would you provide that to the members of the commission?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Walsh, I just made that statement, and it is Monday, and my microphone was not on, so for the record, I would repeat that these will be known as Exhibit Number 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. Bass, go ahead.
The purpose of my testimony is to discuss the transmission line siting methodology and environmental studies conducted for Central Electric Power Cooperative Incorporated with respect to the construction and operation of 230 kV transmission lines and associated facilities. My company conducted numerous environmental studies with respect to the proposed project, including a desktop review of the site, a field-based wetland delineation, a protected species habitat assessment, a desktop review of archaeological and architectural resources, and a reconnaissance field survey. Based on these studies, the proposed project and associated facilities are not expected to have any significant adverse effects on the environment, including, among other things, wetlands, protected species, cultural resources, visual resources, and aviation. As explained in the transmission line siting and environmental report for the Palmetto 230 kV number 1 and number 2, Crescent 230 kV number 1 and number 2, and associated facilities in York County, prepared on behalf of Central, the project's short and long-term impacts on the environment, if any, are minimal and anticipated to be limited to the immediate area where the project is located. Pike conducted a desktop review of available data sources and a field habitat assessment to document habitats within and around the project area to evaluate the potential for protected species to occur and evaluate potential effects on protected species. Pike concluded that the project will not affect any federal or state-listed species and will have no impact on designated critical habitat. The project is not anticipated to jeopardize the continued existence of any proposed threatened or endangered species or result in the destruction or adverse modification of any proposed critical habitats. As to wetlands, Pike documented 0.235 acres of emergent wetlands and 2,630 linear feet of streams present in the project area, although none of the wetlands are located within Central's right-of-way or will be affected by construction. Pike engaged Brockington and Associates Incorporated, a cultural resource consulting firm, to conduct an archaeological and architectural resources investigation. Based on the results of the field investigation and desktop review, Brockington concurred with previous recommendations that the 4 previously recorded archaeological sites are not eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Additionally, isolated finds are not considered eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Brockington recommended that no further cultural resource management consideration is warranted for these resources. As for visual impacts to the project, Pike concluded the project will have very low overall visual effects to the scenic quality of the area due to the presence of multiple transmission lines already in the current viewshed. In my professional judgment, the project will have no significant adverse effects to the environmental or community resources. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Chair Powers, similarly as Mr. Ware, Mr. Bass will be available for questions at any time, but I would propose after the other witnesses for Duke have already testified.
Is that how you'd like to proceed, Ms. Brown?
I would, if that suits the commission.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Bass.
Good morning.
Did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 12 pages of direct testimony on behalf of Duke Energy Carolinas that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
Yes, I do. First, on page 6 of my direct testimony, which was filed on November 18th, 2024, I explained that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has listed the monarch butterfly as a candidate species. On December of that same year, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service changed the classification of the monarch butterfly to proposed threatened under the Endangered Species Act. I wanted to make this update on the record so that the parties in the commission are aware. Second, on page 6 of my direct testimony, the time frame for which Pike conducted the studies is listed as May. The work actually began in April.
Apart from those changes, if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Bass's pre-filed direct testimony, as amended, be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Okay, and this is a separate testimony that you're presenting.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it is separately filed in our docket.
Mr. Bass, you've been busy. Well, the pre-filed corrected direct testimony, Mr. Bass, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bass, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony and the company's application?
Yes,
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
I do. First, on page 44 and Appendix B of the environmental report, which was filed as Exhibit 2 to my direct testimony, as I explained previously, the monarch butterfly has been reclassified from candidate species to proposed threatened under the Endangered Species Act. While this does not change any of my conclusions, again, I wanted to make this update on the record so that the parties in the commission are aware. Second, on page 26 of the environmental report, the time frame for which Pike conducted the studies is listed as May. As I indicated earlier, the work actually began in April. Finally, on page 42 of the environmental report, the statement below table 5.6-1 should read as follows. Total tree clearing within the proposed new right-of-way will be approximately 3 acres, most of which will be cleared by the property owner, QTS, prior to Duke Energy's possession of the right-of-way or substation parcel. This replaces the word all with most.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Bass's 2 pre-filed exhibits, as amended, be entered as the next hearing exhibits in this matter, and that the confidential portions of Mr. Bass's report remain under seal pursuant to order number 2024-739. And we would also be happy to file corrected pages with the commission.
The pre-filed exhibits as amended of witness Bass and identified by him are marked for identification and will place in the record as exhibit number 4. Any confidential versions of Mr. Bass's testimony or exhibits shall remain confidential as long as legally necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bass, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my direct testimony is to discuss the transmission line siting methodology and environmental studies conducted for Duke Energy Carolinas on the proposed modification of the Newport black and white 230 kV lines, construction of the Hans Mill switching station project and associated facilities, which I collectively refer to as the DEC project. My company, Pike Engineering, conducted numerous environmental and land use studies on the proposed DEC project in the Allison Creek Industrial Park in York County, including a review of the area, a stream and wetland delineation, a protected species habitat assessment, cultural resource investigations, and reconnaissance field surveys, all of which are detailed in the report filed with DEC's application and marked as Exhibit 2 to my direct testimony. Among other resources, Pike used Geographic Information System, online resources from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, data maintained by the South Carolina Institute of Archaeology and Anthropology and the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, and the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Screening Tool. Based on these studies, the DEC project will have no significant adverse effects to land use, soil, wetlands and streams, flood zones, wildlife, protected species, cultural resources, visual resources, environmental justice, or aviation. The DEC project's short and long-term impacts on the environment, if any, are minimal and anticipated to be limited to the immediate area where the project is located. In addition to newspaper publications about the DEC project, DEC sent a project announcement letter to affected landowners. Further, York Electric Cooperative took the lead on outreach to local stakeholders and elected officials about the DEC project and Central project. We are not aware of any objections to the DEC project to date. DEC has been prudent in the planning and design of the DEC project. Therefore, in my professional judgment, the DEC project will have no significant adverse effects to the environment or community resources. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Mr. Knutson, would you please state your name for the record?
Matthew Knutson.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corporation as a lead engineer for transmission planning.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 8 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
Yes, I do. On page 4, line 5 of my direct testimony, I need to replace the word acquisition with use in reference to the right-of-way need for this project. On page 6, line 19 of my direct testimony, I indicated that the current cost estimate was approximately $51.5 million. By way of an update, the cost estimate is now $66.5 million. This is a Class 3 estimate that includes required FERC interest, accounts for additional security upgrades, and reflects actual bids received to date on the project.
Apart from those changes, if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Knudsen's pre-filed direct testimony as amended be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, and that the confidential portions of his testimony remain under seal pursuant to order number 2024-780.
Thank you. Mr. Knudsen, is it Knudsen or Knudsen? I mean, I don't want to mispronounce it.
It's Knudsen.
Knudsen. The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. Knudsen, will be entered into the record as corrected, as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Knudsen, would you provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my direct testimony is to discuss the need and necessity for the modification of the Newport black and white 230 kV lines, construction of the proposed Hansmill 230 kV switching station, and upgrades to the associated facilities. These upgrades are necessary to meet a request for new network load submitted by DEC's wholesale transmission customer, Central Electric Power Cooperative, to provide continuing network integration transmission service. York Electric is a member of Central, and York's new industrial customer, QTS Data Center, wishes to directly connect its expected load into Central's system. On November 11th, 2022, Central submitted a transmission service request to DEC to designate new network load under DEC's Joint Open Access Transmission Tariff. DEC then performed a system impact study and facility study to identify the necessary system upgrades. DEC also revised the Network Integration Transmission Service Agreement, the NITSA, to accommodate Central's request, and those revisions were publicly filed and approved by the FERC. For the DEC project, DEC proposes to construct the 230 kV Hansmill switching station on QTS's property in the Allison Creek Industrial Park. The proposed new switching station will accommodate the fold-in of the Newport black and white 230 kV lines. The fold-in will require approximately 3.1 acres of proposed right-of-way between the south side of Hansmill switching station and the Newport black and white 230 kV lines, and approximately 1,027 feet of new right-of-way between the north side of Hansmill switching station and the Newport black and white 230 kV lines. Other associated facilities include relay upgrades at Newport Tie and Catawba Nuclear Switching Station. The DEC project also includes replacements of certain structures on the Allison Creek black and white 230 kV lines and the reconductoring of its entire length. Central will provide a connection between Hansmill 230 kV switching station and the 2 QTS-owned 230 kV substations to be constructed on QTS's property. The expected in-service date of the DEC project is summer of 2027. The proposed facilities will serve the interest of system economy and reliability, are the only reasonable alternative, and are a cost-effective solution for meeting Central's demand. These upgrades will provide the additional electrical capacity needed to serve the additional load safely and reliably. Failure to complete the construction of these upgrades and place them in service will result in DEC's inability to accommodate Central's transmission service request and to comply with applicable federal laws and requirements in the ODE. For these reasons, we respectfully ask the Commission to issue a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity for the DEC project. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Knudsen. Mr. Koenig, would you please state your name for the record?
Matthew Koenig.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Carolinas, and I'm a senior project manager.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 4 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
Yes.
Did you have any changes or corrections to your rebuttal testimony?
No.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Koenig's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. Koenig, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Koenig, would you please provide a summary of your rebuttal testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my rebuttal testimony is to briefly respond to and clarify certain issues raised in the pre-filed direct testimony of the Office of Regulatory Staff witness Michael L. Seaman Wynn. In my testimony, I explained that in response to discovery from ORS, DEC inadvertently misstated the status of discussions regarding right-of-way necessary for the project and provide clarifying information. First, while 4.9 acres of right-of-way are required for the project, DEC will only need to acquire 3.75 acres of new right-of-way. Second, in addition to the right-of-way from QTS and DRB Group, DEC will need to acquire right-of-way from New Horizon, which provides operations and maintenance services for transmission facilities serving York and other members of Central. Finally, while DEC is in active discussions with QTS and New Horizon regarding the necessary acquisition, it is still in the early stages of discussions with DRB Group. My rebuttal testimony also clarifies that the timeline for DEC's project has not changed. While the proposed Hands Mills switching station and the fold-in of the Newport 230 kV line are expected to be in service in October of 2026, the entire scope of work included in the DEC project and described in the company's application will not be in service until summer of 2027. This means that DEC will be able to provide partial service by October of 2026 until line reconductoring work is completed in summer of 2027, at which time DEC will be able to provide full service to the facilities. This concludes my rebuttal testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Knudsen, Mr. Bass, and Mr. Koenig are now available for questions from council and the commission.
Okay. Just to keep it straight, the rebuttal testimony, we did not put that into evidence earlier. Would you like to ask him if there were any changes to that as well? Or did I have it? It was just rebuttal. Okay, it was just rebuttal.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. He only
Okay.
had rebuttal
Well,
testimony,
then
Mr.
I
Chairman.
misstated earlier that when I said the pre-file direct, it'd be the pre-file rebuttal testimony.
Thank you. I got a little
Right.
worried there that I had missed a whole part of this.
All right. Now, stay right there. Just to keep it straight, do you have any questions of Mr. Ware, or do you have any questions concerning Mr. Bass's testimony from Central's?
I do not.
All right. Mr. Walsh, do you have any questions of the Duke witnesses, or any questions of Mr. Bass as to his testimony on behalf of Duke?
Central does not at this time.
All right. Officer Regulatory Staff, any questions?
No questions, Chair.
All right. Commissioner questions?
Chair Powers.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Good morning. I went to the mountains this past weekend, and the GPS took me some back roads out York County, and it's pretty interesting to just see what's out there when riding around looking at the transmission lines and everything. And I mean, there's some big transmission towers and huge transmission towers and in between size, I guess. But anyway, it's impressive grid out that way. One of the things that we're supposed to be thinking about here is how does this relate to system economy? And so I've been kind of thinking about system economy and what is the meaning of system economy? And so I just wanted to kind of put this out there for input from this panel, and some of the things that came to my mind are the system consists of generation, transmission, and distribution. Would all of you agree to that? And the system also consists of ratepayers.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner Thomas, you're asking your questions, and the gentleman, you asked it and they all shook their head, but that's not going to be reflected on the record. So if you could use your microphone and answer Mr. or Commissioner Thomas's question. Sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I appreciate having an attorney look out for me. So the system also consists of ratepayers and customers and employees of these organizations. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And the system also includes shareholders. Would you agree with that?
Not for Central, sir.
Thank you.
Duke Energy, yes.
For Duke, yes.
Thank you. And the system economy would relate to reliability and affordability for customers. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And economy is the other word in the system economy. So I'm trying to figure out, what does economy mean in this context? And to me, in part, that means it's a good deal. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
And fair price. And,
Yes.
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 and reasonable costs. That's for
Yes.
customers.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Seems like pretty much got unanimous answers there, except for the occasion when Central spoke up for our Duke and
Chair Powers.
and their differences.
Commissioner Caston.
If I might, I guess, getting back to what Commissioner Williams said, I hear a couple of weak yeses on occasion and a nod. I don't know if you want, if you're not, I assume that's a yes. So I think what might be better if everyone thinks it's yes, everybody say yes, or if you don't have an opinion, I guess say nothing. But
Speak up, gentlemen.
yeah, I appreciate the nods, but she can't pick that up, I don't think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And also, if someone disagrees, they need to say no. Anyway, so thank you, appreciate that. So in connection with this project, it's obviously a very big project. And so how does all of this relate to the near-term and long-term plans and the local and regional and inter-regional? Has all of that been studied? And I think Mr. Ware, I believe you had some testimony to that effect.
Sir, we went through Duke Energy, Carolinas, and performed studies for this project to meet the size of load that it is. We also, through that process, one of the big things that's taken into consideration from a FERC standpoint, you talked about economies. There's FERC rules on transmission that govern whether it's a embedded or incremental cost. That had went through the process as well on whether or not they would be charged extra or charged the going rate, if you would, for what the transmission system rates are. As we went through that, we have appropriate securities in place to secure those facilities and the dollars from the end customer, as well as the costs of construction for those facilities. So from an economical standpoint, I think this customer is not impacting other ratepayers on the investor-owned side or our members on our side for the cooperatives.
And does Duke have anything else to add to that?
On the Duke Energy side, we have the scope of our project includes only what's required to serve the necessary load at this site. we've also gone through and Mr. Knudsen has went through and ensured that this is only, we're doing what is minimum to construct to serve the load. On our side, we do participate in many bid events on the material side, as well as the engineering, the permitting, and the construction side to ensure that we are getting a good price for the work to be implemented.
Well, so this is a data center that's getting ready to come online, and obviously they use lots and lots of energy. And just given what's been going on here over the last week or two, we've had cold weather, colder than normal, and we've had, from everything I've seen, good service, good reliability, and I think that Duke put something out to the effect that they were operating pretty high, pretty close to maximum levels, and things were going well. But my question would be, so if this data center were online during this time period, would that have impacted reliability?
I will have a comment there. Chairman, or I mean, sorry, Commissioner.
No, thank you.
As far as this project was studied coming online when the in-service date is, as opposed to today. That load ramp is in our forecast, which also go into Duke's plans that they perform as far as providing the adequacy for the system. So our plans right now, this facility's included in those plans. Its load's included in those plans for reliable system.
Just to add from the Duke perspective as well, you're all familiar with the IRP, so this load is included within the IRP filed for South Carolina. Additionally, just the load ramp, the load, while significant in capacity, it takes a significant amount of years to get to that point. And so we've stated that our timeline is to serve the load starting in October. That'll be a very small amount, and then incremental all the way through the load ramp of the ultimate customer.
All right. So let me ask a question about the, I'm going to call them poles. We have some that look like towers, and then we have the ones that look like the poles. And I think Duke is proposing to use the towers and central the poles, and it's all right here in the same area. And I'm just wondering about the differences between those structures, how they hold up long term, how much they cost to begin with, and maintenance and all of those kind of things. So I guess my first question is, just given that these are very, very closely related, close together physically, is there anything that causes one to be chosen over the other?
I'll speak on behalf of Central Electric. Our standard for 230 kV lines is poles. We do understand there are design differences and unique design characteristics that may require tower structures. I believe that was taken into consideration. From my experience with Duke Energy, was taken into consideration for that. So there may have been unique design characteristics that required towers.
I might add one more thing as well from the Duke Energy side. Towers are the standard, which are going to be utilized as the line folds into the Hans Mill station. But within the existing transmission line corridor, in order to be able to cross underneath the Allison Creek line and the 500 kV line, Duke Energy is going to utilize 3-pole structures, which are monopoles. That allows the phasing of those conductors to become much lower so that we can thread underneath those other 2 lines. So we're going to utilize both the 3-pole structures in some instances, and then the lattice towers in other instances.
Okay. So, in some cases, looking at it from somebody who knows nothing about engineering, it seems like you got some pretty big power lines going through the countryside, and sometimes you see the single pole design, sometimes you see the towers, and I'm just wondering how that decision's made. Has there been a benefit cost study that says one, pays off better than the other over the long term?
Commissioner, I can speak to that a little bit. I'll kind of describe the two different structures at a high level. And just so you all know, I'm not what we call a transmission line engineer. I am a senior project manager, but my perspective, just wanted to air that out there. A transmission tower, it does require more labor to install. We have to assemble the tower once it's there. Due to the size and the width of it, we can't ship it on site, and so there is more labor to install a tower. However, the foundation, we call it the grillage, the foundation of the structure is at a much lower depth, and so that helps us avoid the risk of potential rock in the area compared to a direct embed or a foundation type pole transmission structure. So with a pole or an engineered structure, we often have to bore foundations that could be up to 8 foot in diameter, 20, 30, 40 foot in depth. And so the risk of rock is significant. And so with towers, we know the cost. Nothing's going to change unless we hit rock a few foot deep, which is often not the case. So we do see towers as a less risky option to our cost.
All right. All right, so we have, over the last 6 months or so, seen substantial flooding and problems, in parts of the state. Fortunately, York County didn't get hit too hard, but the area that this is going to occur, did they experience flooding or problems due to the flooding that occurred and we saw in the mountains?
I'm not aware of any.
All right. So the cost has changed, and I understand they were just estimates, but so I guess realistically, are any of the costs of this project going to be recovered from retail customers?
Yes, it will.
All right, so basically this is being done to support one customer. Is that correct?
The projects were initiated due to the request from Central.
And the customer is the data center, though. Is that correct?
Duke's customer is Central.
Central's customer is York Electric, and their member is a data center.
Okay. So, but the costs are going to end up being recovered from Duke retail customers. Is that correct?
It will be recovered from Duke retail customers and wholesale customers.
So, Commissioner, just to add a little bit of detail there, so that everybody understands the big picture, we did a little bit of homework to understand how this will impact the ratepayers. From the Duke side, of course, we're not speaking for Central. We anticipate the capital projects through Duke, capital spend through Duke to affect the ratepayers in South Carolina by about approximately 17%. And as Matthew Knudsen has stated, the remaining 83% or approximate thereof would be North Carolina as well as wholesale ratepayers.
Okay. All right, I think I'm going to take a break, see if anybody else has any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Belson.
I just want to ask for some clarification on this last answer, if I could.
Certainly.
When you say 17%, you're talking about overall of the cost, not everybody's bill will be impacted 70%. You're saying that of the total amount that Duke spends on this, 17% is apportioned to South Carolina and about 83% to North Carolina.
Commissioner Belser, that you're correct about the 17% would not be in addition to bills. It would be 17% of our capital spend on this project that would go into the South Carolina rate base.
Okay.
Just to clarify, the other 83% would be North Carolina as well as wholesale customers. So not directly.
So the wholesale piece is in the 83%, and even any wholesale customers in South Carolina, that's not included in the 17% of South Carolina.
I'm not a rates witness, so I can't get beyond the detail that I've described. I'm not sure if there's any overlap there.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that it's not going to increase like retail bills 17%.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
You're correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belson. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. And good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
And some of this may be duplicative, but I want to make sure I understand it. The driver for the installation of all this work is because the QTS data center, correct?
Yes.
Does
Correct.
Duke agree with
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. And is it fair for me to say that the primary, I guess, beneficiary of this project will be QTS? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, there are some, since these are system upgrades, there will be benefits to everyone.
Could you repeat that? Could you pull that just a tad
Yes, sorry.
closer to you?
These are system upgrades, so there will be some benefits to the entire system instead of just QTS.
All right, I guess that ties into the discussion you had earlier with Commissioner Thomas relative to system economy. Correct. Because that was one of the things I was really trying to understand from the question and answers, is system economy, which could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, I suppose. The entire Duke system, the DEP system, or the system in that general area that is going through Central to serve York Electric, to serve QTS.
So the upgrades will benefit the entire DEC system. So we are replacing and upgrading relays at Newport Thai and Catawba nuclear stations. So we're replacing older relays with newer, which improves reliability. Some of those relays are more advanced kinds of relays that include an extra layer of protection, which is especially beneficial since it's right next to a nuclear station. And then the Hands Mill switching station is taking 2 5-mile lines and splitting them into 4 2.5-mile lines. And that helps to reduce exposure to faults in the system. And then finally, we are reconductoring the Allison Creek lines, and we're basically doubling the capacity of those lines. And I realize all this is geographically just in one area, but our 230 system is designed to transport bulk power from our large generation units out to our load. And so anytime we improve the reliability or capacity of that system, it benefits everyone as a whole.
Okay. If QTS were not requesting this, would Duke still make the same improvements during the similar time frame?
No, these upgrades are initiated by the QTS request.
Okay. I assume that's true of Central?
Yes. And maybe to dig just a little deeper to what you said, how does this transmission siding project improve, I guess, the quality and reliability of power for DEP customers or for Duke customers system-wide? Can you, I heard what you said, but it was pretty nebulous.
Yeah.
And maybe that's as good as it gets.
So these lines directly serve our Catawba nuclear site, and so those are big units. And so all these 230 lines in this area transport that power from that station out to the rest of DEC's system. And so anytime we make improvements to reliability or reduce the impact of faults, like Hans Mill will do, that's going to help us to transport that power from Catawba out to everyone.
But again, if this particular facility was not going in place, these improvements would not be done, correct?
Correct.
And I think I heard you say you revised the 51.5 million to, was it 66.5 million?
Yes.
Is that a more, I assume a more refined number?
Mr. Koenig can speak to that. I believe it's going from a class 4 to a class 3 estimate, so.
Yeah, correct, Commissioner. That is a more refined, a number we're more confident in.
Could it be more?
We consider it a class 3 estimate, which allows for the potential of 20% upside to that 66.5 million.
So a class 3 means, is that plus or minus 20%, or it could include an additional 20%?
Class 3 is, it could be 10% lower or 20% higher from that 66.5 million.
Is that just a Duke Energy classification, or is that some universal classification?
It is used pretty widespread, not just at Duke Energy.
So if it was 20%, 12, 13, that'd be about 13 of, it could be, I guess, up to 80 million, plus or minus?
Potentially.
Is, trying to follow the testimony. Will Central or York Electric, for that matter, will their cost increase because of this data center, or will it have any effect on rates?
This, from our standpoint, won't have any impact on rates as far as negative impacts to existing members of Central or others. These costs are getting paid, all actual costs are getting paid by Central. They're getting ultimately recouped from the end customer, so QTS. So QTS is paying all of the bills right now for this construction. So as far as funding of the construction, it's paid for 100% through QTS being able to provide that funding, and there's securities in place. When you did you mentioned rates and the difference between cost and rates. The costs, why 17% of those costs go in there, Duke Energy, FERC requires them to follow the higher of two different methods. It's either the embedded cost or the incremental cost. So when this was FERC filed, there are protections in here. If cost goes up on this project and the load stays the same, it can shift to an incremental cost allocation method, in which case, if it's more than where the existing rate is that Duke Energy charges for transmission, If it increases that rate, then it will have to, those extra costs will go back to QTS as far as payment of those costs over time.
Is that the federal law you were referencing in your testimony, Mr. Knudsen?
Yes.
What Mr. Ware just described relative to FERC?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I want to make sure I'm understanding this. As far as this data center QTS coming in, whatever cost there are relative to Central and York Electric, QTS will basically be, I guess, paying for that through rate or through some system improvement fee or whatever.
Correct.
And that would not be passed on to the customers of York Electric, and I guess the other co-ops via Central.
Correct. Yeah, it would not be.
And this QTS is in York Electric's service territory, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Knudsen, your response or testimony is that the cost of the project will be recovered from, I guess, Duke's cost, the 66.5 million to 80 million or whatever it may be, will be recovered from Duke's retail electric customers.
It will be recovered from retail and wholesale customers.
Even though this facility is specifically in York's service territory.
The Newport line fold-in, the Hands Mill, and the Allison Creek and associated things are all Duke Energy equipment.
So, relative to Duke's retail customers, will they recognize or have an economic benefit as a result of this project? As a result of QTS going in, and I assume the
region around the site will get the benefit of the tax dollars. That's the question you're
I'm
asking.
sorry, what was that?
The region around the site, like York County, will get the benefit of the development tax dollars from QTS, if that's what you're asking.
I appreciate that. That's not what I was really asking, but thank you for that information. I guess what I'm trying to hone in on, understand, is if QTS is paying for all the costs, Central and York Electric, why are Duke's wholesale and retail customers paying for a facility that's going in York Electric service area?
Commissioner, I can speak to that one. The cost of this project is governed by FERC policy. And us as Duke Energy, we don't have the ability to make value judgments on the customer and how it impacts the ratepayers. It is FERC policy, the way it was set up.
And And that FERC policy, what I'm understanding or hearing, and I'll check on that too, requires these costs to be passed on to Duke's retail customers. It's a mandate in a federal regulation.
Yes, the FERC does this higher of calculation that Chris Ware was talking about. If the cost is below the transmission rate, it is recovered by our retail customers. If it goes above that, then it is the customer has to pay for that. So we are under that rate for these costs now.
I can't remember where I saw it. I don't remember. It talked about large customer economic development, or I may have dreamt it. But relative to this particular project for Duke, not for Central, does Duke consider this a large customer, or an economic development project, none of the above, something else? I mean, what does Duke consider this?
Our customer is Central, so this is a wholesale customer for us.
Just a requirement for the wholesale customer through the agreement?
Right.
Okay. I could keep fumbling through these papers and probably find more, but I'll leave it there, and if anyone has any questions and something pops up, I'll follow up, but I have no more questions right now.
Commissioner Bells.
Gentlemen, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions. Who referenced the OAT in their testimony from Duke?
I did.
That was you. Could you tell us what the OAT is, please?
It's the open access transmission tariff.
And that's something that's filed with FERC, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what are Duke's responsibilities under the OAT?
We have to serve our customers, and it defines the method in which we study any new requests from wholesale customers.
Okay. And Central is a wholesale customer of Duke?
Correct.
Okay. So what happens when an entity moves into, and Mr. Ware, you may want to jump in here, but an entity moves into the service area of one of your members and wants service? What happens then?
There's a request made from our member through Central for service, and we request service through Duke Energy.
Okay. And as a transmission provider, can Duke say no?
No.
And why not?
We have to serve the load in our territory. So any requests that we get, we have to figure out how to serve that.
Okay. And is that the federal law that you indicated in your testimony could be violated if Duke didn't provide service to Central here?
Yes.
Okay. You don't happen to know codes or regulation reference on that, do you?
I do not.
That's a hint. Anyway, okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. So contributions in aid of construction, are you familiar with that concept?
Yes.
Yes.
And I know that applies to Duke sometimes. I mean, if you have a big customer that requests service directly, then potentially contributions in aid of construction would come into play. Is that correct?
Correct.
But this is not a direct customer, so then that kind of takes that off the table, or?
So for wholesale customers, it's my understanding that we can't do contributions of construction and aid. We can't direct assign costs to wholesale customers like that.
All right. Mr. Ware, you seem to have some knowledge in this area. Do you have anything to say about that?
As far as the Duke costs, those come through the open access transmission tariff, as we've discussed. That one's a FERC regulated. They're obligated to what their transmission tariffs are. As far as contributions in AD construction, as far as payment of facility costs, on our side, the central lines are 100% funded and paid for by QTS.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, good morning, still morning. Has any individual, organization, government, nonprofit raised any issues or concerns with this project that you are aware of?
Not that we are aware.
I'm not aware of.
None that I'm aware of.
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. I'm going to limit my questions for obvious reasons. I feel fine, but I sound horrible. Mr. Bass,
Good morning.
I noted that you focus some on noise impact from the corona, and just wanted you to speak a little bit more about the impact of noise that you took into consideration.
Yeah, we briefly mentioned corona in the report, but it's basically when the air and the humidity impact with the.
Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yes, it's basically when the humidity in the air create discharges on the conductors themselves. It can create that popping noise that you can hear during high temperature days or when it's foggy, but it's generally not noticeable once you're outside the edge of the right of way. And since this project is mostly within the QTS boundaries of the project, there should be no impacts to adjacent landowners or property owners.
Could you describe a little bit about who those adjacent property owners are and landowners? What's the feeling of that community?
Sure. So the project location is within the Allison Creek Industrial Park in that north central part of York County. It's equidistant generally between the towns of Clover, Rock Hill, and York, probably about 1.5 miles west of Lake Wiley. The actual project area, there's a volunteer fire department just north of the site. And then you've also got Hands Mill Highway, which is a 4-lane highway crossing through the eastern portion. There are a few residential property owners east of the Duke Energy transmission corridor. There's a couple subdivisions, but they're approximately 750 to 1,000 feet away. And there's a decent amount of vegetative screening in between there to limit views of the facilities. And then those filtered views for some of those property owners that would potentially have views, they're already looking through the transmission corridor. So overall, it's a minimal impact from a visual perspective, in my opinion.
And Brockington's analysis, how do they take into consideration potential burial sites?
So they do a background research. So they look at quadrangles and previous studies that have been performed. In addition to that, they also perform a field reconnaissance survey where they conduct shovel testing on 30-meter intervals throughout the entirety of the 92 acres. So that's going to include all of the facilities for the QTS substations, the central transmission lines, and the Duke transmission lines. Based on their background research, they found where they identified 4 previously recorded archaeological sites. They're basically archaic scatter or lithic scatter, flaking of preparing arrowheads and things like that. They revisited each of those sites and were not able to recover any additional material, so they recommended those to continue to be not eligible for the National Register. They also found 2 additional archaeological sites within the QTS property, but those were what they determined to be isolated finds, basically arrowheads. So with that being said, no burial sites were identified, and each of the archaeological sites were determined to be not eligible for the National Register.
Thank you. It's an impressive amount of shovel testing.
It is.
Do you anticipate any additional requests from DES, DNR, or Parks, Recreation, and Tourism?
I don't at this time.
And you identified that the monarch butterfly is now on a potential threatened. Would you talk about what that change? I know the impact was no change in your recommendation, but would you talk a little bit about what that means?
Sure. So the monarch butterfly was previously identified as a candidate species, which is basically on their watch list to determine how the species is going to continue either thriving or declining. They've determined at this point, because of its continued decline, that they're going to uplist it to proposed threatened. And so what that means is there'll be a 90-day comment period for which the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be seeking comments from different agencies, from the public, to determine whether or not it is appropriate to actually uplist it and what the ramifications of that would be. So I believe that comment period ends in mid-March. So sometime following that, they'll make a determination whether or not to uplist it or keep it in its current status. It's really difficult to know if that'll happen because we've seen some other species go on to the proposed listing and they stay there for quite a while. So we're kind of in a wait and see at this period in time.
If it had gone on, how much of a difference would it make?
If it goes on to the actual threatened or endangered species list, what that would mean is we have to continue coordination with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to determine the best way to continue with our work. I don't believe that would mean that work would not progress. It would just mean that the Fish and Wildlife Service will get an opportunity to have an increased awareness of our project, increased recommendations, and really work with us on best management practices to minimize additional impacts.
And minor curiosity, but the 2.7 acres that are of farmland that are of statewide significance, do you know how that's determined?
It's determined based on soil type and really nothing more.
Okay. I'm just double checking because a lot of my questions have already been wonderfully asked. I'm shifting my eyes to Mr. Knudsen and Koenig. Is there any look at this point on what this generation, and this could be for you, Mr. Ware, but from a reserve margin perspective, does this kind of use make a big impact on your reserve margins, and do you look at that at this point?
So we do have to plan for generation in the future. Since this is out a few years, there is a power purchase agreement between us and Central for this, and so we make plans for that in the future with future generation construction.
Okay. And is there any update on the clearing permit and the right-of-way?
From a clearing perspective, we're going to be seeking a erosion control permit from York County. We have submitted that, and we are currently in review, picking up some of those comments, and plan to resubmit here in the next couple weeks.
And do you see any issues with getting the MPDES permit?
I do not.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Just a couple of things. I think, Mr. Ware, you were the one that testified that this would create jobs in your testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many jobs does a data center really create?
Direct jobs is usually low, under 100 or so full-time type jobs is what they typically will create. It's the support jobs in the area for contract work. A lot of the systems that are employed here aren't maintained by the data centers themselves. They're maintained by others in the community. So,
You mean like construction and other things?
specifically, yeah.
Okay.
Construction, the jobs can be quite high for construction jobs.
Well, once the construction is over, those jobs go away, do they not?
These industries tend to have ongoing construction where
Okay.
they'll retool.
I think there's some belief or statement that one data center takes up as much power as 100,000 households in a month's time. Is that something you've heard or something you're familiar with?
They draw a lot of power, sir.
And don't employ that many people. Is that a concern? I mean, I know the co-ops that I've dealt with and lived under, they do a lot for economic development, and really are the biggest partner that these particularly rural counties have is the co-op. But it's kind of if you compare the job ratio to the amount of power they need, does that seem fair, or does that seem equitable, or?
I think from my perspective, it is what it is. As far as the contribution in dollars, I know that provides a big benefit to the community. And I don't know, did you want to call on York at all?
Thank you, sir. That's all I have. Any further commissioner questions? Any redirect from either attorney? Ms. Brown?
Chair Powers, no redirect. I just wanted to offer that, given the wholesale relationship between Duke and Central, we understand there's been a substantial discussion of FERC law and policy here today, and the law and policy governing network upgrades. And to clear up any confusion, the company intends to file a letter following the hearing with the citations to that FERC law and policy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walsh, any follow-up?
Chair Powers, no follow-up at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair Williams.
Before you let the panel go, I just want to just talk with Mr. Ware just a little bit about those jobs. You said a low amount of jobs, and I guess on a comparison basis,
Right.
that may be fair. But did you say below 100? Can you get a little more specific than that?
I don't have exact figures with me right now.
But based on what you do know, they're going to be members of that community where the data center will operate that will have the opportunity to apply and potentially receive employment from QTS?
Yes, yeah, they do employ local workers at their facilities.
Okay. And is that something that has been discussed with Central, or is this something that maybe you just picked up in passing? Has there been a real discussion about the economic development potential for placing the
Yeah.
data center at the current site?
Yeah, so as far as development, I know the investment does bring a lot of dollars into the community, goes into the school system, helps them provide additional wage benefits for their teachers and workforce there, helps put funding mechanisms into the communities that may not exist today. So does provide economic benefit for the communities out of the investment that's there, in addition to the permanent jobs that will be there, plus any of those construction jobs would be able to afford.
Now, this may sound like a strange question, but I want to ask it to get your opinion on the record. Why does that matter? And if it matters, why is it important? The economic development piece.
I think as far as the data center goes, I think being a part of that community is something that they're striving for, and I think that's the importance there.
Okay. And you may not be able to get into the details of this, but is it possible for an entity like QTC to locate their facilities somewhere else?
Yes. Yeah, they have facilities in other locations as well.
Okay. And if you can't answer this question, would you want them to locate someone else, or are you happy that they're deciding to locate where they are?
I think we're happy they're locating where they are.
Okay. Are there any other benefits that you can see that we haven't discussed for them to locate in your area?
No, I think we've addressed it as far as the dollars that they do put into the community and investments.
Okay. And I'm going to ask a question that I already asked again, just to make sure that I'm clear. There's no one nowhere that is opposing this facility for any reason at all that you all are aware of.
I'm not aware of it.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Based upon the Vice Chair's question, do you now have any redirect, Mr. Walsh?
Chair Powers, I do have one quick question. And Mr. Ware, I'm going to pick right up where Commissioner Justin Williams, where the Vice Chair just left off. But just to what extent are you aware of the efforts that were undertaken to reach out to the community?
I know we had attended some events with the local school system. The amount of money that they'll receive is beneficial to the actual school system in the area. I had participated in those events.
And are you generally familiar with the efforts of York Electric Cooperative to reach out to the community?
Yes, they have a excellent community outreach program in the community, and they do provide a lot of beneficial organizations.
And do you know if that was done here? Did you have any involvement or understanding of that, in addition to what you just?
Not in addition to what I have.
Okay. Chair Powers, I have no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions based on that, Ms. Brown? Office Regulatory Staff?
No questions.
All right. Commissioners, anything further based on that?
One quick question I was thinking about, relative to the 66 million or 80 million or whatever. If it did approach that 80 million number somewhere around there, would that change or alter whether it might go to incremental?
There is a point that if it increases, it would switch over to incremental or instead of embedded. I'm not sure what that level is.
It's been running through my head since we said it, so I had to get it out. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Casson. We're going to take I'll ask any more questions based on Mr. Caston's question. Mr. Walsh.
None from Central.
Oh, thank you.
Chair Powers, we would ask that our witnesses be excused.
They can certainly stand down.
Thank you.
What we're going to do, we're going to take a morning break right now before we go further. Even before we even ask you if that's your case is closed, I'll give you a chance to think about that. We'll come back at 10 minutes to 12 and resume this case, and hopefully we can wrap it up. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your testimony and your time.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're in recess. We are back on the record on 2024-286E and 2024-287E. It is my understanding that Duke Energy Carolinas and Central Electric Power Cooperatives, they have put up their panel, their witnesses. Is anything further from either of you?
Chair Powers, no other witnesses, but just a last item for me. I have, I'm going to move that exhibits C, D, and E from our application, that they be marked as exhibits 5, 6, and 7 for the hearing, and that they be moved into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
Thank you. These items will, C, D, and E will be marked as 5, 6, and 7. They're marked for identification and placed in the record as the numbered exhibits, 5, 6, and 7.
With that, Central has nothing further. Chair Powers.
Thank you very much. ORS.
Mr. Chairman, would it be okay to have our witnesses come up and grab their notebooks and place cards or name cards?
It's okay.
Thank you.
I guess they were just happy to get out of here. Left it behind.
They were ready to come back if needed.
Yeah. All right. Officer Regulatory Staff, any witnesses?
Thanks, Chair Powers. Officer Regulatory Staff calls Michael Seaman Wynn to the stand.
Come forward.
Mr. Seaman Wynn, if you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Seaman Wynn. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Michael Seaman Wynn.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed as the Deputy Director of Energy Operations for the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Michael Seaman Wynn who pre-filed 10 pages of redacted and confidential direct testimony in these dockets on December 20th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any edits, corrections, or changes to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions as those posed in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Michael Seaman Wynn be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Seaman Wynn will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
And ORS requests that the confidential version of his pre-filed direct testimony remain under seal pursuant to order number 2025-20.
The confidential version shall remain confidential as long as legally necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wynn, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Could you please present it at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My testimony provides the results of ORS's review of the application of Duke Energy Carolinas for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity for the modification of the Newport B&W 230 kV line and the construction and operation of the Hands Mill 230 kV switching station and associated facilities in York County, South Carolina. Additionally, my testimony provides the results of ORS's review of the related application of Central for a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity to construct, operate, and proceed with initial land clearing for 2 double-circuit 230 kV lines within the Allison Creek Industrial Park in York County. The existing DEC Newport B&W 230 kV line will be bifurcated with both ends folded into the proposed Hands Mill switching station. One section of the bifurcated Newport B&W 230 line from the Newport tie to the Hands Mill switching station will retain its existing name, with the second section between the Hands Mill switching station and the Catawba nuclear switching station will be renamed the Branyan B&W 230 line. An additional 4.9 acres of right-of-way will need to be acquired by DEC to support the new lines. The Hands Mill switching station will be constructed within the Allison Creek Industrial Park. Relay upgrades at the Newport tie and the Catawba nuclear switching station will be required as part of the project. Additionally, certain structures on the existing Allison Creek B&W 230 kV line will be replaced to raise the line and allow the Newport B&W 230 line and Branyan B&W 230 line fold-ins to cross underneath it. Finally, the entire length of the Allison Creek B&W 230 line will be reconductored. The proposed central project includes two radial double-circuit 230 kV transmission lines between the Hands Mill switching station and the two substations that will be owned and operated by QTS data centers in the Allison Creek Industrial Park. The proposed facilities are driven by the capacity and reliability requirements of QTS. Both projects are necessary to provide service to QTS. ORS's review concluded the proposed facilities may result in minimal impacts to the environment and will support the company's ability to provide reliable electric service to QTS. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman-Wynn. Chair Powers, Mr. Seaman-Wynn is available for questions from the parties and the commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Duke, any questions? All right, Mr. Walsh.
None at this time.
All right. Commissioner questions?
Chair Powers.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman-Wynn, part of this application includes an initial clearing. Do you have any concerns with support for that element of the application?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then this is a question I should have asked them, but it's in your testimony. Do you know what B&W stands for associated with these?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. I feel better.
Commissioner Thomas, any questions? No, sir. Okay. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Caston.
Might as well ask since you're here. Relative to that, the incremental cost question, does ORS have any thoughts or opinions on, I guess, where the break point would be relative to that?
Commissioner, FERC has an established set of policies and guidelines that Central and Duke and York are all required to operate under. As York has brought this customer forward to Central, and Central is a wholesale customer of Duke, there is that obligation to serve the customer. I would just leave it at that, sir.
All righty. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any further commissioner questions? Hearing none, any redirect?
No redirect.
All right. Anything further from any party? I guess we are done then.
Yeah, and Chair Powers, actually, just one item. When we started the hearing, I forgot to mention my co-counsel, Frank Ellerby. I know he wanted to be here today. He just had an irreconcilable conflict, and I know he looks forward to being here in the next matter when he's available. Thank you.
We know Mr. Ellerby well, and wish him well.
Chair Powers, if I may,
yes, Ms. Brown.
I know you didn't ask me this question, Commissioner Williams, but B&W black and white.
Okay. Thank you very much. I might have to swear you in before it's over with. Well, Thank you all for your presentations and your hard work on this case. We made it through some bad weather. I hope we can make it through without some more like that. But everyone have a joyous day and peaceful night. We're adjourned.